Hey, welcome everybody to this week's NIM community call. Don't let my fake background fool you. This is indeed a very prestigious event. As usual, experts say that it's in the top 5 most prestigious events in the world still. Yeah, this is a very exciting community call because we're not going to have a community call pre-NymVPN launch ever again. So the NymVPN launch is happening exactly in 1 week. So the team is very busy and very excited, as you may imagine. And to discuss that, I brought the man himself, Harry Halpin, on, NIM CEO and founder. How's it going, Harry?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. So of course everyone's like really overwhelmed with the launch coming up. A lot of, as you probably know, if you're running the client or you're running a node, a lot of code being pushed out on a regular basis. In particular, big push to get the kill switch in, so there's no leaks, and a big push to make sure that Serbs are kind of up and running properly. And there's still a lot of things we'll have to do after launch. But we're trying to get like kind of baseline minimum up for launch. I hope everyone's enjoyed the gateway selector, and we're gonna try to make that easier to use, add some cool animations, and hey, good to see everyone here, and a lot of other stuff. So yeah, it's a big push on all fronts.
Absolutely huge push indeed. We're seeing your questions already, guys. We got a bunch of great questions. We're going to be addressing those. And as usual, you can leave them either here in the YouTube chat, or if you want to preserve your privacy, you can also leave them on the NIM Matrix server. And we're also keeping an eye there, and we'll bring your questions to Harry and myself. I wanted to first talk about this launch event that's coming up. It's a really big one. Maybe let's start about the location first. So we're going to have it in London at the Frontline Club. What should people know about the Frontline Club?
Yeah, so the Frontline Club is mostly famous for where Julian Assange hid out. The owner of the club, I think his name is Von Smith, was a big supporter of WikiLeaks, and Julian did a lot of his launches there to reporters. The club itself, of course, predates WikiLeaks. It was founded as a club for reporters that went to the front line, that went to war zones. Today, reporters that would be in places like Ukraine and Syria, back when it was probably founded, other countries, unfortunately. And so it's really, it's like a journalist club. It's a club for and run by journalists. And we thought that was a good place to launch, both to kind of, honor the influence that, WikiLeaks had on building anonymous systems. For those of you that don't know, even before I met Chelsea, I was discussing Mixnets and NIM with Julian personally and the Ecuadorian embassy for a number of years when he was kind of hit out there. And that before he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, he was basically personally being protected by the owner of the Frontline Club in his estate, I think like north of London. So it's a pretty historic venue. Unfortunately, it has very limited capacity, and it sold out like weeks ago. It sold out in a few days. So I assume there'll be a lot of reporters there, and I think a lot of probably friends of WikiLeaks. And therefore, we suspect we did want to make something more open to the community. So we are going to do a kind of open after party after the official launch event. So if anyone's in London, get in touch with Sudo or myself, and just say, hey, I'm in London on March 13th. I'd like to hang out. And we're going to do a kind of private party at a hacker space called the Newspeak House, which is also in London. And that will be after the event in the evening, late evening. So we'd love to see community members there. I think, I'll be there. Of course, a lot of folks from NIM will be there. Chelsea will be there. Very wide cast of characters from all over the political spectrum, but everyone who's kind of interested in anonymous communication will be there.
That's going to be very exciting. I can't wait for the event. What are you going to wear, Harry? Do you already know?
Probably just this. I'll see. I mean, if I have time, I'll try to get a suit dry cleaned, but you never know. But yeah, it will be fun. I think, it's hard, to be honest, because as you know, the VPN space is very crowded and it's very scammy. And there's a lot going on in the world today, geopolitically, like every day there's something crazy from Trump. something strange is happening. So reporters are very distracted, and people are very distracted. And so we have to kind of break through all of the distraction to get people to really focus that we finally, after, Jesus Christ, 5 years really, have finally delivered a usable version of a mixnet that you can use to be anonymous on the internet. And that's something which previously didn't exist. And thanks everyone for running nodes and giving bug reports and trying it out. I mean, if you remember like a year ago when we said we were going to do this, the code was looking not so great. It was very slow. It was very buggy, barely worked. And now I mean, it's not 100% stable, but it's getting, I use it every day and don't have real problems, particularly fast mode. Obviously the anonymous mode is much slower, so I use that mostly for high security stuff, particularly crypto stuff and messaging. But we will try to speed it all up after launch as well.
Yeah, so we are launching, of course, with a bunch of key features, right? So the kill switch is coming to NymVPN, which is something that's a community favorite, and obviously it's a very important feature. What about after the launch? So what are the features that you are most excited about that will be added to NymVPN, down the line during
So
2025?
we're doing launch when we are, because we finally have, assuming the kill switch and everything works, we finally have parity to most normal commercial VPNs. So you don't want to do like a launch if you don't have if you're worse than other systems, if you're less secure in some significant manner. So now that all of those problems have been solved, we want to become better than existing VPNs and better than obviously any other anonymous communication system. There's not too many out there, too much else out there. So what we're hoping to do, I think the big push post-launch will be in two particular categories. One will be post-quantum. So we, again, as you've seen, like Alfredo and some of the team, and Anya, the team members have been working out the post-quantum proofs. Once we're convinced everything is kind of provably secure, we will launch post-quantum both on the DVPN and the mixnet. And I think that's going to be, it will, of course, we might make it an optional feature. So you can turn off and on, because it will have some speed impact. We'll make things a little bit slower. But we'll see. Maybe we haven't fully tested that out yet. But I do think if you look at the recent announcements by Microsoft and Google about how much success they're having building a quantum computer, we've also heard IBM is making leaps and bounds with the US government. I've even been invited to a quantum computing training by IBM. We do think that it is becoming less of a fantasy and more of a significant threat. So we want to support, post-quantum, so that whenever there's a quantum computer, you'll still be anonymous, your message will still be encrypted, and ideally your metadata will be defended. Now, I think Nym works reasonably well with in Russia and in other countries that have kind of some level of censorship, but we do know it doesn't work very well in China, right? So that's a big problem, because a quarter of the world's population lives in China. So we do want the NymVPN to work in China. We're hoping to go visit Hong Kong. We have open communications. We have a number, of course, of Chinese investors, really great folks like HashKey, which organized Shanghai Blockchain Week and other events. Now they're all waiting to see if it will work in China and kind of greater Asia in general. So I think that's going to be a huge focus. And there's some nice side effects of that, because that will going to change some of how we work on the inside, on like the networking code, to basically push things down. So right now, if you use the mixnet, you have a lot of SERBs and ACKs. We can do the acknowledgements. The acknowledgements do not add to the anonymity, because they're distinguishable from the Sphinx encrypted packets. They're smaller. So we're probably going to drop those ACKs, those acknowledgement packets, and use more standard reliability protocol stuff, which should actually speed up the mixnet a lot. And we think that's going to be a pretty big win. We have a number of other speed ups. We haven't used Daniel Bernstein's optimized code yet, so that's in a branch. We'll check that in. that should maybe give maybe a double speed up even on the mixnet side. And we will also be working pretty hard on using kind of different protocols that, such as, for example, we see a lot of people using VMS, V2Ray or X2Ray, depending on, in China, and we'll make sure that we can support those protocols in the first hop. So I think that that's going to lead to a lot more users because a lot of the world is under censorship. And we do believe that, Europe and the United States will become under censorship shortly, right? So just because, it's in every country, there's a demand to restrict people's access to information and to kind of prevent the internet from letting people communicate and form cross-border alliances. That trend is going to continue. So we're going to work very hard to divert that. On a usability front, we do plan eventually. So those are the two big changes, and they'll probably come in two different batches over the summer, maybe spring if we're fast at it. We've already built a lot of the post-quantum Rust code. The censorship work is still much work in progress, but if you've noticed, there's been some changes in the background happening even in the last release to help make things more decentralized and more resilient. So, for example, as some of you noticed, when you use the NYM wallet, you get this kind of weird thing. You couldn't collect all the shares. That's because you're relying not on the NYM API ran by us, but the NYM API ran by other validator instances, and not all the validators had upgraded their RPC code, so you couldn't check the multisig on the anonymous credentials. So the other things we're working on, there's some usability work. We would like to make it easier for people who are running the NYM mix nodes on their desktop or their laptop, even with a stable internet connection, to become gateways. So you can kind of easily open your system, get a residential IP perhaps, and people could then essentially get NymVPN for free by just using their internet to let other people use their internet as a NymVPN. You can't do that today. It's a bit hard because you have to install all the gateway code, and the gateway code is kind of segregated from the VPN code. But eventually, we can imagine those code bases merging, and then eventually even cool stuff like staking from in your app. Now that's going to take a while, but we think that's awesome. And then maybe the most important thing, which is we're experimenting with, we've seen that there's been some discussion in Telegram with machine learning. I'll respond after the phone call with our latest results. But can NYM withstand kind of AI machine learning? The answer is yes, not completely, but does pretty good. And we have some stats to back that up. But in order to make sure NYM provides the highest level of anonymity, it's kind of like a statistical process. And we need to see how many people are using the network, how many people are paying, how much data they're sending, what's their kind of volume and timing. And then we can basically, as you know, you always send cover traffic using a Poisson process, and you're with a mixnet, and your traffic is kind of sent out bit by bit. But we just haven't really looked at those parameters. So based on the initial month or two of usage, we will try to optimize those parameters, and that could also have huge effects on speeding up the network, or possibly making it slower, so that you actually get kind of a real level of more anonymity. And in terms of being anonymous, we also would eventually like to support showing people kind of the maximum, kind of the bounds of how anonymous they are. That's typically done with anonymity set or entropy. And we're kind of thinking of ways to visually display that to the user. So there's a lot. So just because we're launching doesn't mean we're stopping. Actually, we easily have another year, 2 years of code. And although this year, I think we're really going to be focused on, again, post-quantum, censorship resistance, making it easier to run gateways, even for like normal home users that aren't that technical. And in particular, just speeding the network up and making it more reliable and faster. Next year, we're probably going to switch focus a bit and really make sure everything's properly decentralized. And so we will be this year focusing on more research. Obviously, we set the discourse up. It's not used as much as we would like, but kind of going further into the DAO decentralization and resiliency R&D to make sure that the network could survive if, me and Sudo get thrown in jail or hit by a car or something. We need to make sure that the network is fully decentralized, and that will mean handing more and more power progressively to the community, but with enough kind of backbone so that things don't immediately fall apart, or there's not like pump and dumps or anything crazy going on.
I only have one more question for you before we jump into
Mhm.
the community questions, but this is my favorite question, so I want to make sure that I get this in. What about split tunneling? Because I think for NymVPN
Yeah.
specifically, because of how secure yet how like not optimal for everyday internet use the mixnet is, but it's like crucially important for certain high risk or where your security needs are higher. I think split tunneling is uniquely important for us. When do you think that that gets implemented? And do you
That's really
agree with me
hard
that
to
it's very important?
estimate because it depends on the different operating systems. So some operating systems make split tunneling fairly straightforward. Others, particularly iOS and Mac, make it basically impossible. So I think it really depends on the operating system. I think for Linux, Android, and perhaps Windows, we'll see split tunneling sooner rather than later. We're a little bit hesitant to give a date for split tunneling across all platforms because we have to actually maybe even communicate with Apple um, effectively to figure out how we can get split tunneling working on Mac. So if you look at like other VPNs, they don't do split tunneling on Mac. Now we have, historically, some people have said, well, how do you communicate to Apple? Well, it's very difficult, but it's not impossible. When I was building the Web Crypto API back in 2012, which was a JavaScript API that people still use to access cryptography in the browser. I was working for the World Wide Web Consortium, which is a standards body under the inventor of the web, Tim Berners-Lee, and we had like an official Apple spokesperson who joined our consortium. Apple was part of it, but they weren't responding to our request to open up cryptography on Apple computers. So what I did is I gave a talk at Chaos Computer Congress, which was this kind of big hacker conference, also where WikiLeaks launched, and also where NIM eventually launched in Berlin. And I think it was in Hamburg that year. And I gave a talk about web crypto, and I complained very publicly in a talk that Apple wasn't cooperating. And it ends up the head of Apple cryptography was in the audience. He came up to me afterwards and apologized. He said, "Oh, I didn't really know. We can definitely do this." And then, in a month or two, they would just not talk, and then boom, everything got implemented, and it got released and across all iPhones and Mac computers. So, I actually feel pretty confident we can eventually get it working in Apple, but we don't want to give it like an exact deadline. All the other devices, it will come. It will take a while though, depending on the device. I mean, I would hope we can get it out on every device this year, but I don't want to make. I'm actually more confident, for example, like on things where we completely control the whole stack, like we control, right? With the open source community, we control the Mixnode software, right? So, or the ways Mixnodes communicate. So it's very easy, or the NymVPN code base. So it's very easy for us to be like, hey, let's add some post quantum crypto in, or let's change it to make it more censorship resistant. We know how to do that. We don't have a dependency on another company or another project. But in the case of split tunneling, we do have dependencies on the operating system of Microsoft or Apple or whoever.
Music to my ears. It's very nice to hear that we're working so much on this topic, and it's going to be excellent to see split tunneling release, maybe even on Mac and iOS. And with that said, let's jump into community questions. We have a whole bunch of them, so I want to leave ample time to cover all of them. We have a host of them from Beyond first. This is an interesting one. So, question: are there any plans for a free version of NymVPN, for example, with limited traffic and exit gateways, so that people can evaluate the app before paying?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there's some companies like Proton that offer kind of like a free version that's very restricted. We will probably have some sort of time delimited free version. We're experimenting with this right now, but it'll essentially be like, we can hand you a credential and you can use it for a bit, but it's not a kind of renewable credential. And so luckily with the ZK-NIM system, that's pretty easy to do. But we haven't decided like exactly how to do that yet. We're kind of experimenting with reporters to figure out like how much someone needs to test. Again, the problem is if you offer something like this, the danger is that gets abused, that people, if we made like a faucet for free usage, people would just always go to the faucet and no one would pay, which would kind of like make the system very economically unsustainable. That being said, we're going to keep a lot of things going on, right? So there are parts of the system where it's very advantageous to have more people use systems. So the mixnet, right? So if I'm using like the fast mode, the DVPN mode, it doesn't really, it's a bit like Tor. It doesn't really matter like how many people are using it. I'm not like more anonymous because other people are using it. The DVPN and fast mode are really for censorship resistance and don't offer a high degree of privacy and definitely not anonymity. In terms of offering anonymity via the mixnet, which is again the anonymous mode, you do gain quite significantly from the number of users. So the goal would be that we would try to keep that perhaps even free or cheap for as long as possible. And also we have existing integrations against NIM, right? We have the Zcash integration, we have we have Monero integrations, we have people that are already using it, and we're not going to turn those integrations off. So I think we're going to try to keep some limited, probably mixnet only version free as long as possible. And a lot of people wouldn't pay for the mixnet by itself because they think it's too slow. And it is currently pretty slow. So I don't think that's a huge deal. And we might keep it time limited. Again, the ZK NIM system is really flexible, so it gives us a lot of options. But yeah, there'll definitely be like a free version. I think the simplest thing to say is at launch, the NIM APIs and SOX tunnels will still be allowing mixnet access for basically free for a while. So if you just want to use the mixnet, don't freak out about the launch. We're not going to turn you off. And then there will be some way to test the DVPN.
Excellent. That's great to hear. All right, next up is also from Beyond. A second question, is there any plan to buy back, I guess, refund in 30 days after purchasing the subscription? As far as I know, in some regions, there is a possibility to refund up to 30 days. What's a refund policy, Harry?
We were discussing that, but the problem, by buyback, you mean like a 30-day refund policy?
Yes.
So that's very, I mean, the problem is you kind of run up against the unlinkability of the system, right? So we when you pay with fiat, you have normal fiat abilities. If you're paying with Monero in particular or Bitcoin, it's much harder to process refunds. So I think we're going to, rather than offer a 30-day refund at top, we're going to offer this kind of free usage and try to keep the price low, particularly for crypto. So people who I think we're doing 50% off for NIM token users. And that means that it's much cheaper. So hopefully there's less need to run a lot of refunds. Refunds on fiat are pretty simple. Refunds on crypto are pretty hard. So I wouldn't say we probably won't have 30-day refunds at launch.
You mentioned something important here, which is Monero payments, guys. You heard it here first. Monero payments and other crypto payments are, of course, coming, as we mentioned earlier, a bit more vaguely with Jaya in a previous community call. It's just a matter of getting it implemented, but it's coming very soon. And I think paying for NymVPN with our, ZK NIM credentials, dissociating all use from your personal information, doing that payment with Monero is an absolutely killer combo. I think that's basically.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get Monero out there on day one of launch. I mean, we're still testing it, obviously, and it's only a few days from launch. But assuming it all works out, it shouldn't be impossible. As you know, we already have like a BTC pay server working. That's like how NIM Shop works. Now, a lot of people are asking, well, why don't you support X or Y? For example, a lot of people, particularly in Asia, use USD Tether. But you have to remember the reason why we support certain payments and don't support others is the amount of work for integration of that into the payment flow. So, we obviously worked really hard to support NIM tokens off the bat because we want to help our community out. We want to encourage people to buy NIM tokens, to use who have bought NIM tokens, to use those NIM tokens, get some real value out of it. That being said, USD Tether running on Tron integrations are non-trivial. Same with Zcash. Again, things that kind of run their own chain, or you could even say near or whatever, are harder. I mean, they involve a lot of implementation work to support even ERC20 tokens off the bat. We won't have NIM ERC20 working off the bat just because we have to essentially do an integration against Ethereum. And we just don't have enough time and resources to do that right now. We could if we didn't prioritize security and privacy, but again, we prioritize like responding to the audit reports and like fixing everything. But we will slowly but surely, probably based on how difficult it is and how much demand there is, put in particular other payment tokens. So I know there's probably demand for Zcash, though I think Monero is fine for a lot of people, but I know there's a big Zcash community out there and we do want to support them. Obviously, we want to support ERC20 NIMs, not just native NIMs. If there are any other particular currencies or payment methods you want us to support, just put them in the chat channel or mention them in Telegram and we will look at them. Okay, let's go.
Great, excellent. Next up is also from Beyond. He again front-loaded the questions quite a bit, but I think they are all good questions, so thank you, Beyond. Does NIM plan to build its own ecosystem of services like Proton does with Mail, Wallet, Drive, etc., or do you rely on community grants? Good question.
I mean, I think we'll try to rely on community grants. Now, obviously, if something's really important, like making a NIM mixnet usable via NymVPN, we will do it. NIM Technologies, the company, will do it ourselves. However, I don't plan to run an email service anytime soon. So if someone wants to build an email service on top of NIM, I know there's been some interest from some email services like RiseUp had interest in mixnets ages ago. Greenhost, a Dutch email service, had interest. I think they also do web hosting. I would really be really open for community grants. There's a lot of low-hanging work as well. For example, it's very easy to use Tor with Thunderbird. I use Thunderbird for mail. Why can't we make NIM work under Thunderbird? Thunderbird's the Mozilla kind of email client. So I think it'd be great to have these kinds of services. But again, we're not like the world's largest team, so we have to be judicious, let's say, with our resources. So the more the community can do, the better. And if some of these things become successful, we're happy to introduce you via the NIM Ecosystem Fund, which has had very little action to VCs. We have seen that some of the VCs like Tioga, A16, they're still interested in supporting them. They'd be happy to look if a high quality project comes along and get its own funding. That'd be great. While the VCs, they don't have anything besides token, they don't have equity, they don't have any control over NIM. They are big supporters, and the majority of our validators are actually ran by our VCs, which is very nice of them because they all their token is totally mature. They could leave any point, but the fact of the matter is the majority of them have held their token and aren't leaving, which is great. And that includes, just to answer questions 4 and 5 of Beyond, the NIM browser. I mean, our preference would be to integrate against an existing browser. I used to work in web browsers. They're a lot of work to maintain, even if it's just like a skin on top of Chromium. Tor spends a lot of time trying to patch up privacy holes. Mozilla, it's getting harder and harder because Mozilla is obviously, as you've seen the news, becoming less and less privacy preserving.
Yes, unfortunately.
I'd recommend people get off Firefox and just move to Brave. And so we're going to try to integrate probably against Brave at some point. I've hung out. Brendan's always been very friendly to NIM, and we had people from Brave coming to the launch event. So they're keeping an eye on us, and I'm pretty excited about that. If someone wants to make a NIM browser, go for it. You could probably take Iceweasel or whatever and put NIM on it pretty easily. What percentage of payments do you plan to convert to NIM? We have operational losses, obviously, but we've done very careful money management for many years. We've made a lot of money on Bitcoin, so we're doing okay. We're not going to disappear overnight, so we have no urgency. So my theory right now is just like probably take the payments and just convert it all to NIM and see if that helps. So it gets converted, as I know Anya demonstrated, it gets converted to a buy order on Bitfinex because Bitfinex supports ERC20 and Cosmos, and they can be rebalanced really nicely. So there'll be a buy order bot running on Bitfinex that will get activated when people buy the NIM token. And I think in the beginning, we're just going to convert it all, or at least a lot of it over. And then we'll just see how many people use it. We don't really want to make these decisions until we see the user flow, right? So, for example, if we have too many users at once, we might have to like scale up our cost, right? We might have to get a bunch of customer support people, blah, blah, blah. And that's going to be really expensive. So that will require like taking some money out. But also we do think, the NIM price is pretty low right now. It should probably go up. So it'd be nice if we could use the launch to kind of like push things a bit by seeing all of that originating flow convert to NIM token.
Excellent.
And then again, there's the other questions of how do we distribute the NIM token fairly to the node operators, and those questions involve the ticket book counting, and that's something Claudia is working on. And in the beginning, I think we'll probably just put it back into the it won't be converted using a special algorithm, but Claudia has worked out how to convert it based on work, where the ticket book is like a symbol of your work, and that will go into process as shortly after as possible launch.
So that sounds great, and really looking forward to it, to seeing it. Next up is from Bump Me Up. Thanks for a great question. I'm not sure I understand the question fully. So will there be a?
I mean, I assume you mean collaboration with operating system, Unix operating systems, right? So I suspect what you mean is, are you going to become a core package across most Linux distributions? Is that what you mean? If so, the answer is ideally yes. So just as you can install Tor and Firefox without going to like our weird repo, you could just like go to like the latest version of the Ubuntu or Arch Linux or Void, or whatever one you use. We would like to get as many repos as possible. And we also are planning on eventually getting into reproducible builds. The code is moving too rapidly for that right now, but the combination of reproducible builds plus being into the core Unix distros, I think will increase the safety to make sure that your client isn't backdoored or anything. And that's really important to us.
That's really nice to hear, actually. All right, so next up, I'm not sure I understand this question either, but maybe you do, Harry. So it's question number 6 now from Beyond. How do you?
Oh, so
yeah. How do you plan to convert other currencies such as Bitcoin, Zcash, etc.? I mean, will it be on the market, or do you plan some kind of a HODL to sell at the best rate? Oh yeah, now I get the question as I read it out loud. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just gonna. It's going to probably be pretty instant right now. The way we've set up is pretty straightforward. It's very hard to predict the market. Like, we don't know if it's going to go up or down any more than you do. So I think when people buy, I'll just like instantly convert over. So, and we're not converting over to, how do you say, other currencies. Like, everything just converts to NIM. So if you pay in NIM, that's fine. That's great. We don't need to do any conversion. And if you pay in something else like dollars or Bitcoin or Monero, then that gets converted to NIM. And then that runs a buy order, and that buy order will be at whatever the price is at the time the buy order is ran. And the buy order should be shortly after your payment order. Now, you could imagine, and we're looking at like techniques, and we ran some experiments a few months ago with the big buyback, looking at like what kinds of techniques like are the most effective. For example, if you do batch payment, if you batch a bunch of orders together, it has a bigger impact than just like a bunch of small orders. So we'll keep that in mind. But that being said, you have to see the initial order flow to optimize. So it's going to be ran in a simplistic fashion for at least a few weeks. Then using the knowledge we gained last December, because we built some of these algorithms, plus what we see the initial user flow is, we can maybe do some optimization. But again, we're not going to convert to BTC or Zcash. Everything gets converted to NIM.
Yes. Next up,
go for
it. Thanks for the answer, Harry, and thanks for the great questions beyond. Now, I will take Rocio left also a bunch of questions. I will take 3 of her questions in one go, because she's basically asking whether there will be special subscriptions or opportunities for a bunch of different groups. One of the things she's asking is whether activists will have special access to NymVPN or some kind of a special subscription. The same for feminist groups or other, like women victims of violence and such things, or human rights groups. And then lastly, whether the NIM community will have any special subscription.
Yeah, I mean, we are trying. I mean, we're trying to get special subscriptions just working for journalists right now. So eventually we'll have special subscriptions working for other people. I think that'll happen shortly after launch because it's kind of the same technique as we could use for journalists. Um, we do plan to have a NIM for social good program. I think Daniel, who many of you know, the NIM Latin American head of community, he's going to kind of help support that program and work with Jaya, and we'll work with NIM Squad League. So yes, there will be all sorts of probably free subscriptions, particularly for activists, particularly for NIM Squad League members or other people that need the software. But the validation process is actually something which is currently being experimented with, but it will look most likely similar. Technically, it will probably just be an access code that gives you a ZK-NIM. And then how do you get screened? How do you know that you can get this access code? I mean, that's what Daniel's working on to figure out. And it will probably be, effectively, there'll be likely not in the beginning, not an open application form, but eventually I imagine there'll be an open application form. But in the beginning, I imagine people that, if Daniel knows this is a great group and he can, or they're a NIM Squad League member, they're recommended by a NIM Squad League member, we'll go into that. We'll help them out.
Yes, obviously, guys, as you may imagine, we are thinking about these things. So one of the internal discussions that I started way back a few months ago is how we can make sure that especially our key contributors, the many squads who have been doing so much for us over the past years, get preferential access to NymVPN. This is important stuff to us. Thanks for the answer, Harry, and thanks for the question, Rocio. The next up is an interesting one, also from Rocio. So Harry, do you think NIM's growth as a company will change your cypherpunk side? This is a good question.
I don't think so. I mean, we don't imagine the company growing that much unless the customers really like, if users take off, then yeah, there's going to be a lot more customer support people, but we don't imagine like the company changing, and nothing will force the company to change. Right. So again, just to be clear, the VCs have no equity. The board, it's me and Alexi. So there's not like anyone that can force us to change. We are going to try to like appeal to as many people as possible, right? Because again, your being anonymous requires hiding a crowd, and that crowd has to be giant, large as possible. In order to get a largest possible crowd, we need to appeal to many different types of people. So, we're going to get people from like just look at the launch event. We'll have people from we'll have mainstream journalists there, various like both, people involved in Bitcoin, such as like Peter McCormack's been invited. They would swing, you would call a bit conservative. People that swing a bit left have expressed interest. MIA has expressed interest. So who knows who's going to who's actually going to show up because after at the actual day of. But we imagine that we're going to have to cater to a large group. But if you mean by cypherpunk, you mean will we suddenly become like pro-government? No, that's not going to happen. Governments are still, particularly in the UK, trying to undermine basic encryption and human rights. We don't see from the Trump administration any moves yet. We're watching the Tornado Cash case very carefully, and the EU, we've seen a lot of pretty negative stuff. But again, watching the Alex Pertsev case and the rollout of MICA, the Universal Privacy Alliance is hopefully doing a good job watching that. But we don't think it's going to change anything. Ultimately, it's important that we deliver actual privacy, the ability to actually be anonymous online in the highest level of security. And I think the real question we have is how many people actually want this? Is it 100 people? Is it 10,000 people? Is it 100,000 people? Is it a million people? Is it 10 million people? We don't know. And so most of our focus is going to be broadcasting out via all possible methods, everything from ads to mainstream media to kind of weird friends of ours like Adam Back and stuff. We're going to push everywhere to make sure people know that this is available, and then we'll just see how many people use it, and we'll optimize around it.
Yes, exactly. These upcoming few months are going to be absolutely crucial in the in the life cycle of NIM. Next up, let me answer this one, Harry, actually, because I have a bit of an announcement that I promised
Okay.
to the community. So Rocio is asking, what time will be the presentation on the 13th of March? It is going to be at 7 p.m. UTC. That's when it's going to start. And of course, you're going to catch it live on YouTube as well, which is also an invitation for all of you guys to please come and celebrate with us. This is probably the biggest moment Nim has ever seen. So please keep an eye on our Telegram. And also, if you're on Galaxy, keep an eye on our Galaxy platform as well, because we're going to be announcing either today or maybe tomorrow a nice little campaign, a giveaway campaign for all of you guys who have been with us for all this time, which is going to be about coming to the event with us, watching the live stream together, and celebrating the launch of NymVPN. So this is going to be a pretty big event. We want to make it big for you guys as well. So the giveaway is going to be very nice and big. Yeah, make sure to keep an eye on our channels, because this is going to be announced any moment now. Actually, only the final details are being finalized. So 7 p.m. is the short answer, and please come and celebrate with us is the somewhat longer answer.
Yeah, so someone asked what books I
Yes.
have on my shelf behind me. It's a whole bunch of different ones. This is a good one. I just had to choose one. It's not in fashion anymore. It's called Lewis Mumford, Myth of the Machine. Not only very well written, but with very interesting illustrations of ancient technology, including stuff from the Stone Age. The general point of the book is it kind of looks at how technology was used over thousands of years, how it went from kind of Neolithic times into like modern city states, like in ancient and then large empires like Egypt, the Egyptian kingdom with the pharaohs, and Assyria. And the general point is that technology has always been part of being human, but that it can both kind of increase human freedom, or it can lead to kind of mega techniques which enslave people, which make them subservient to the dominant system or power. So obviously at NIM, we're on the side of freedom. And it's a good book because it kind of puts a lot of the cypherpunk stuff in a larger kind of historical narrative that goes really back to the dawn of time.
That's actually, Salazar, can you please drop a link to this book in the chat? So it's The Myth of the Machine.
Yeah, I don't know if I have access to the chat.
No,
but,
Salazar is here with us.
Myth of the Machine,
yes,
by Lewis Mumford. It's a little bit hard to find, actually. I think it's out of print. Now, other questions. I'm just going to kind of go through them quickly because I got to leave, unfortunately, at some point. I have more meetings. Is a ZK-NIM a ZK Stark or ZK Snark? No, it is an anonymous credential. It's based on what's called, it's actually ZK-NIM is a variant of the Coconut signature scheme, which is a variant of the Walters signature scheme, which is a variant of the Poncheval Stern, a French cryptographic signature scheme. Most signatures you can't unlink, you can't re-randomize in these signatures. You can, and Coconut ZK-NIMs lets you do what's called threshold cryptography. You can decentralize them among different validators. So it's not a ZK Stark or ZK Stark. It's something a bit simpler. And the reason it's a bit simpler is because we just have to prove you paid or not. We don't really need to prove anything else. If we were going to build more complex use cases, we'd have to either extend ZK-NIM to take into account different attributes, or which would make it a little bit larger with each attribute, or allow the ability to embed generic ZK snarks into the ZK-NIM. And we're actually discussing that. That's something we're very interested in. And it's an open part of research. So we think at some point ZK-NIM will allow general purpose ZK. Now, there's a lot of questions about how to do that fast and optimally. We didn't want that stuff to happen immediately because we don't want to slow the system down right before launch.
Makes sense.
DeadConnect is in Argentina. I just saw that. We will definitely send people. I don't know if I can go. Argentina is a bit of a stretch from Switzerland. November is far away. I can't think that far ahead yet. I did go to Bangkok at last minute for DevCon. I do think that we will have people there. I'd be shocked if we didn't. How many IP addresses can a single person get right now in NymVPN? Well, I mean, you get as many as you want. If I'm using NymVPN, every time I connect and I change server, I get a different IP address. So you have as many IP addresses as you have servers. You really wanted to rotate through them, you could. So you have a lot of IP addresses. I don't know how many exit nodes we have right now, but I think it's a fair amount. It's a few hundred, so you at least have access to all of those IP addresses, and some of those people rotate their IPs as well.
This is a good one. So what's the most like mad inside info that you can share at the moment?
Something recent. I mean, NIM is a pretty drama, a pretty drama-free space. I do think. I mean, there's of course things that have happened recently. So we're pretty good. We're pretty good friends with DarkFi, and DarkFi. The DarkFi devs, including Amir, they didn't have an iPhone to develop on. We had an old one that we were developing on. So I went over to see Amir. I gave him my old iPhone, and he, of course, always has been pushing me to use graphene. I tried early version of graphene a few years ago, and it didn't work very well, so I stopped using it. And I've heard a lot of good things about it now, so I decided, hey, let's try it again. And I installed graphene on. I tried to install graphene on my device, and in process of installing graphene on my device, I had to upgrade my fast boot. And upgrading fast boot destroyed my Windows, my X Windows system, and borked my whole Linux kernel for some reason. So I actually destroyed my machine in process. I did successfully get graphene working. So yeah, we are also up all night hacking with our friends and destroying our machines on a regular basis. I did eventually recover. It was a graphics driver, which is no big surprise. Some terrible fucking closed source thing. I think of some other. I think we did a team meeting at a castle that was owned by a entrepreneur. I'm not going to say who it is, but they're also a big Pirate Party fan. So when we got to the castle, I saw there was a Pirate Party flag flying in the castle, and I just assumed Alexei had, because he's also really into the Pirate Party, had put it there. So we assumed that he just covered the castle in anonymous mask and Pirate Party flags. Indeed, the owner of the castle
That's amazing.
Actually, I think the most mad thing that's going on right now in my life is people may not know. I used to be very into music. I'm too busy for it right now, but I'm still friends with lots of musicians. And when you're a musician, you have a big band. At some point, your band doesn't work out. I had a friend called the Baron, who was the band called Amoebics, and they produce kind of dark, kind of gothic pagan music. And he got a motorcycle accident. And when you get a motorcycle accident, you can no longer play music, right? So he basically learned how to forge swords using ancient medieval techniques. And there was a rumor in their last album that he had given up music and fled to this island to forge swords. So about 20 years ago, I lived in Scotland. And I was like, man, I would like to know if that rumor is true. And I couldn't find his like old email didn't work. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to get in touch with him. So me and a friend, we hitchhiked I was very broke at the time. We hitchhiked in Scotland to the Isle of Skye. It was storming at the time, and there was no way to get a boat to the island. So we found like a drunk sailor. The drunk sailor put us in his boat. He was very wasted, and it was a terrible trip. Like, we got super covered in water. Of course, I was a geek then. I was actually a systems administrator at the time. And I carried my laptop with me. My laptop was totally toasted. Like the water got into the laptop, toasted it. So whatever. It just happens when you travel. Sucked for me at the time. We don't have a place to stay. It's raining. We go to the local pub, and my friend I was traveling with, some really drunk local tried to like assault her. So then I like I don't know, punched some guy. Basically, had a big pub fight. That was a mess. And then eventually, like some Scottish dude let us stay in his garage. And then next day, we somehow hitchhiked uh, to see my friend the Baron, who's a swordsmith. And many years later, he has finally, because we've stayed in touch, he made me a small sword and a kind of Nym
Show
sword.
it. Do you have it?
Pretty cool. It doesn't have the Nym logo on it, but it has like kind of cool stuff on the blade that he inscribed by hand. And now I have this really big problem because the UK government has made not only encryption illegal, they've made swords illegal. So it's not clear how I'm currently working with them right now to be like, oh, like, how do you get the sword out of the UK? Like, can I just put it on a train or in the back of a car? Can you just like drive down to our launch event and like hand me the sword? And yeah, so I may have a large sword on me during the event. I'm still trying to figure out how to get out of the UK. We will eventually figure it out. I've got some other funny stories involving, but this is for another time, involving myself and Motzi, Marlon Spike, and a guy in Russia with a large knife. But I'll save that for later.
Okay, that's gonna come for the.
But yeah, so that's probably that's at least the most mad thing I'm trying to deal with now, is trying to get my sword out of the UK.
Look, Harry, I know you want to go, so I think we can actually finish on that note. It was a pretty crazy story. So
yeah, if you could can you like cut and paste these? Or I could just give me a second. I'm gonna cut and paste these. I'll just answer them in Telegram, or people I assume are in Telegram. Yeah?
yes, of course.
Okay. Well, I will launch. I will cut and paste these. Okay. No Trump payments. Don't worry there. Although you never know. I do have we are getting some, I guess the most mad thing, I'll maybe end on this. The most mad thing is, people really know we don't like the NSA, and I won't say who, but somebody from the Trump administration actually reached out and was like, oh, like, kind of like, can you recommend someone that will help us on the dismantling the NSA front? And we're like, that was a crazy ask. I actually, I'm not allowed to, obviously. I have a background record. But yeah, if anyone, we're excited by how crazy things are getting. So the world has gone totally mad, and surveillance will increase. So I think it's perfectly timed launch.
Perfectly timed launch.
Okay.
Let's finish on that note. Big thanks for coming on, Harry, and taking time out of your extra busy days for this community call.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got 10 minutes late for another meeting. It never ends, but the launch is stressful. So take care, everyone.
I'm going to wrap up alone then. Bye, Harry.
Rock and roll.
Rock and roll. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're left with me with my fake background, but with a very real community call and a very real ending to the community call. Big thanks for joining us. Big thanks for the amazing questions. Hope you had fun with Harry. Again, this is going to be the very last community call with no commercially launched NymVPN. Exactly a week from now, almost at exactly at the same hour, so at 7 p.m. UTC. Please join our live stream, participate in the giveaway, and also tell your friends to do so. This is going to be our way of celebrating together with you guys this launch event, which of course, as Harry explained, is going to be at Frontline with limited seats. So we wanted to make sure that you guys who have been supporting us for such a long time get prime access and great view on the event. Now, of course, what's left, as usual, is our tradition to give you guys your POAPs for attending this community call with us. So we're going to do that. You will need to go to the usual URL, which is sent in chat. I'm also showing it on screen. So it's nym.com/go/POAP. And the secret phrase is, drumroll, kill switch. That is because this was basically the feature that held NymVPN back from its original launch date in January. We heard from the community that you guys really, really want to kill switch, and that's actually a super legitimate point. It's a very important feature for a VPN to have. So we made sure that with the commercial release, we have Kill Switch, and of course, as you heard from Harry, a bunch of other exciting things are also still coming to NymVPN. So huge thanks to everybody, not only for joining this call, but also for sticking along with us for the ride. We appreciate it, and see you guys around on our channels, and also next week at the launch event.